On Point, hosted by Peter van Aartrijk. Conversations with interesting and informative experts on technology, branding, culture, social media marketing, and other great topics.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Peter van Aartrijk, your host for On Point, brought to you by our good friends at Wells Media, which includes Carrier Management, Insurance Journal, and other fine publications. Our guest today is Jenn Urso, who's a professional development and executive coach, and she runs a consultancy called The Leadership Project. Welcome, Jenn.
Thanks, Peter, for having me.
Yeah, this is a topic I really dig, and I can't wait to talk about leadership and coaching and maybe a bit of insurance, but really more about professional development and what's going on in the work world, which is just fascinating right now. But before we get into the work stuff, I'd like to know where you're from originally, where you're born, and where'd you grow up?
I'll answer that in a second. I have to tell you that I like hearing the word dig in combination with both insurance and leadership development.
Yeah, dig. I dig it. That's something that boomers
that.
were able to say
Yes,
back in the
yes.
day. And I think it started in the 50s. But
Yeah, I like you're bringing it back. To answer your question, though, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. That's where I spent the most of my life. I moved out to San Francisco Bay Area in my 20s for a brief stint, and then to Washington, D.C. for 6 years. And then I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, where I currently live in November of 2019. But Cleveland is where I was born, raised, and spent much of my life.
Man, whenever I think of Cleveland, I don't know why, but well, there's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's on my bucket list. Every time I'm there, like it's closed, like because I'm working during the day, seeing clients, and then at night I'm like, oh, I really want to go, but it's open. It's just so, it's just I can't get in. But the other
You gotta
thing,
go. You
I
have
know
to
I
make
got to
the
go.
time.
Yeah.
Yes. It's
The
worth it.
other, actually, I'd like to see an induction ceremony. That would be cool.
I haven't seen one either. I would like to do that too.
All these cool 70s bands that I grew up listening to with LP records, and that to me the 70s music is late 60s 70s is what I love the most, but I like all of it.
Is there a band in particular that you'd like to see inducted?
Oh man, I have in my office here, I'm looking at, this is ridiculous, Jen, I have like 350 CDs, actually no,
Wow.
450. I just did a count. So I have all this music, and I have LPs. My brother just got like a really cool, he's an audiophile. And LPs have made a huge comeback. He's got a very high-end turntable, and the sound is so rich, with the LPs. And the CDs are a little more tinny, but they still work. And, I have all Spotify, I got Pandora, I got all that stuff. But I just love playing a full thing. And so, like, I would love to see Grand Funk Railroad. I don't even know if those guys are still alive.
I don't know either.
But I'm dating myself big time. But I liked all these bands, all of them. Like, I really grew up, like, with Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. And I know it's all, like, drug music and stuff. But it's just, I don't know. There's something about those bands, and there's so many more.
Yeah. Good
that
stuff.
that's really good stuff. But the other thing about Cleveland is I used to love the Drew Carey show,
Oh, yeah.
and that guy, like with the accent and the Cleveland vibe, was very
Yes.
cool. I missed that show.
Yeah, that is a good show.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so all right, Cleveland. But then, and you mentioned you're in Nashville now, a beautiful town. Nice. If anybody hasn't been to Nashville, North Carolina, you got to check it out. It was completely devastated by Hurricane Helene rain coming down, but it's a mountain valley town. It's beautiful, tons of great restaurants, tons of culture and arts, and breweries, craft breweries, which I really like too. So
Thank you for the plug. Yeah,
yeah,
Asheville is a gorgeous place and very, very different moving here from the hustle and bustle and pace of DC. It's taken me some time to recalibrate, but it's a good spot for, I think, where I'm at in life. And there's a lot of people that gather here that are makers and designers of all kinds in business or more traditional arts. And there's a lot going on here.
yeah. So tell us how you got into all of this stuff. And I know there's a pretty the insurance industry was a pretty big influence, but how did your career unfold, and how did you get interested in leadership and professional development?
Good question. When I was 22, my first professional job, I was working at an alarm company that did residential and commercial alarm systems. And I started in the telemarketing department being a manager. And total candor, I didn't really have the experience or qualifications to be managing a sales team, but I learned quickly. And I thrust myself into both learning about sales, which essentially is relating to people, getting to know their needs and how to speak to them and how to deliver a message, and also how to manage a team of people. I had 20 people initially in that telemarketing team that I was responsible for. And then that grew over the years. I stopped managing that department, but I started managing other departments in that company, including overseas. So this was in 2002, 3, 4, somewhere around there. And at that time, outsourcing was newer, and there was a lot to learn around managing a team in India and managing a team of managers. And so I was young, but I knew that I liked the responsibility and the opportunity of helping people succeed at work. And I liked relating to people and understanding their needs and helping them to feel seen and valued and confident. And so that stuck with me throughout my career. And then over the years, I was a non-traditional college student. First, I went right after high school. For 3 years, I paused. I started working, and I went back to college in my late 20s. And at that time, I was working at an insurance broker in Cleveland in the benefits team. And I had this really beautiful experience of going back to school and learning on the job and in school, and getting to cross apply what I was learning in my real world work experience. And then when I graduated, so I studied business management with an emphasis in OD, organizational development. When I graduated, I pitched the benefits team a new role in organizational development, which they didn't have at the time. And traditionally, that kind of role sits in HR or people ops. But I wanted to stay in the benefits team. And thankfully, the executive director at that time took a chance on me and let me form this role. And the role was to really design professional development programs and tools around the 100 people that were in the benefits team. And so I got to really apply so much that I had been learning and experiencing through the years. And then through that and onwards, I've just had this fascination and passion around helping people succeed at work, because there's so many things outside of our control in work and in life. And so I want to give people the tools to help them succeed at work. And that's not just for the person. It doesn't benefit just the individual. That benefits the teams and the companies. It strengthens industries. It strengthens the workforce. And so I can zoom out and see the benefit of that kind of work on many different levels.
Yeah. So there was so I think in Cleveland you worked at Oswald, right?
I did.
And did that lead to the job at the council then?
Yes, it did. Yep.
Okay.
So I went from Oswald Companies in Cleveland to CIAB, the Council of Insurance Agents and Brokers in Washington, D.C., which is a national trade association that represents brokers. And yes, because of my relationships at Oswald, it led to a relationship with the council.
Yeah. Okay. And then you've also worked in IT as well, right? Those are, what did you say, insurance and IT are like the two big industries so far?
Not IT. So in my current business, the Leadership Project, I work with insurance and a lot of technology. And so like big tech.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yes. And so those are the main industries that I continue to serve, although I work across a lot of different industries too.
Yeah. Right. Well, you mentioned the pause, the whole college pause. You had another pause you told me about earlier in 2018.
Yeah.
That we definitely got to get into that.
Yeah, I guess I like to pause.
Speaking of pauses, yes. Tell us.
Okay, so I'll start off by saying that I do like to pause and I like to create new chapters. And there was a time in my life where I looked at that tendency and didn't quite understand it, but now I see that I see a different arc in my life of stopping what I'm doing and redirecting and seeing the benefit of having a squiggly career or a squiggly line versus that straight linear line that some folks have, but that just wasn't the way my life went. But this particular pause you're referring to was in 2018, was working at the council in Washington, D.C., and really enjoyed so much of my life and my career in DC. It honestly, DC is one of the most precious, special times in my life, and I learned so much and I just had a great time. But there was something inside of me that said it was time to do something different. And I didn't know exactly what that was, and it felt scary. It felt scary to have a secure job and people that you love working with and a city that felt like home to say, no, I'm going to disrupt all of this, pause and create a chapter, but I don't know what that next chapter might be. So I decided to travel and go out into the world and see what information presented itself to me. And I decided to resign, get rid of nearly all of my things, which looking back was unnecessary, but it's what I chose to do at that time, and throw on a backpack and go travel the world for 6 months. I told my friends and family, I don't know if I'll be gone 6 months or 6 years. I don't want to know. Got rid of my phone number, just really had this clean purge. And it turned out that I traveled for just about 6 months before returning to the States with a newfound clarity and understanding of what I wanted to do. And those 6 months were some of the most rich and transformative in my life. I did a lot of things that I never thought I'd be able to do. And I pushed myself out of my comfort zone. I met so many wonderful people. And I didn't think of this as market research at the time, but looking back, it was. I asked every person that I met in all the countries and cities that I visited, what is your relationship to work? What feels good? What feels bad? What feels challenging about the state of work? What's a good leader? Why do you experience that, or why don't you experience that? How are you going to be a good leader? And I talked with young people entering the workforce. I spoke with a lot of people that were mid-career, questioning their place in the workforce, feeling frustrated and burnt out. I spoke with a lot of founders, especially in Abu Dhabi, that has a big startup scene. And across the board, I found that there are these two themes emerging, which is that people, regardless of the country or the culture, are connected to work as a source of passion, identity, values, obviously currency. And simultaneously, there's a frustration around the system of work that feels like it can swallow us up. And that is a machine that we're having a hard time managing. And so that really led me to come back and start my business and become a certified executive coach so that I can work with people around how to balance their lives, which is quite difficult right now, to be candid, and also to have the specific tools that they need to be successful at work.
Mm-hmm. So that's a great story. I like to think I did the same thing at a different time in my life and career. I was just got out of college and traveled around Europe and a little bit of Africa, Northern Africa for 6 months, and it was by myself. But I find that when you're by yourself, you actually meet more people, have more fun, because the bigger the group you travel with, the more logistics, and it just, somebody's feeling good one day, bad the next, and vice versa for you, and you're constantly managing others. Where if you're alone, it does get very scary sometimes at times.
But you know what? You're right, because if you're with someone, your attention is naturally placed on that person or people. And when you don't have that attention placed to people that you know, then you're open to and looking for other experiences. And before that 6 months, I traveled a lot on my own internationally, and I've learned so much about myself. And I really offer to people that if you can, go travel alone for a while. You'll get to know so much about yourself and the world.
Yeah. The musician Kebmo, he says, the more I see, the less I know.
Yeah, exactly.
And I used to sit around in cafes and park benches, and it took me a while to get good at this because I was always rushing to the next city or whatever. I'm like, I'm just going to chill out, and that's when you just chat with people. You learn a lot. But I loved the market research you did. That's very cool, and you had all this knowledge. Oh, there's a theme here, right, all around the world, all different cultures. You come back, you start. Is that when you started the leadership project?
It was called Activate Within at the time. My business has gone through three different change
Yeah.
or name
Okay.
changes, but essentially it's been the same. And Peter, I want to offer one more thing about when I was traveling, there was
Mm.
this pinnacle of being in Bali and working with this healer. And she asked me, what's happening with work today? Because she had seen this big influx of people from the West coming to work with her to help heal from the stress of work. And so for me, that was the last signal that I needed around, yeah, there's really something here. And while my business is not focused on well-being per se, it's more focused on helping people be successful and perform well. There's also an element of giving people tools so that it can alleviate some of the stress they're feeling.
Yeah. Right. 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 Man, I got so many questions for you. I think maybe we could start with that balance of the workplace environment, the traditional stuff, how people are organized, and how they approach their work, and how confident they are in doing their work, and who do they go to for help, and the typical stuff that you said does emerge from HR, but then also the personal side of it, the well-being side, which I've noticed it's been increasing in importance, or at least discussions, for maybe a decade or more. But with COVID and people working at home, and bosses starting to learn more about their people because everybody was working at home. The bringing your whole self to work kind of theme came out,
Mm,
and
mhm.
then suddenly bosses, not just bosses, colleagues were now much more discussing, like, the personal side. And when I was in my 20s and 30s, like, you never talked about your personal life. You never
Mhm.
um, you'd have to sneak out to go to the doctor. And I was fortunate. I was a man. Like, there were women who had to hide the fact they even had kids. Just wasn't a thing. And now it's a lot different. Um, so how is that how you? Maybe you could tell us more specifically what is that balance between the work stuff and the personal side, and you can't heal both. I mean, you can't heal either one. You got to heal both. You have to work on both. Is that kind of the general thing you're saying?
Well, here's the thing. I get asked around well-being and balance and tools to avoid burnout all the
Hmm.
time. And I'm gonna be really candid. I don't know the answer because
Hmm.
right now the work system is being squeezed so mightily from all these factors, the market, the economy, legislation, et cetera, et cetera. And I I know people are hungry for solutions around avoiding burnout and finding more time. I think that people are not going to like my response here, but I think that what I've seen in the leaders that are doing it well in terms of being careful of their energy and not burning out, which is few and far between, is it comes down to discernment and delegation and saying no and being really protective of where your energy goes and your focus goes. What I see is we have so many competing demands right now and so many things vying for our attention. And what we're doing often is giving away our power and our attention to things that don't really matter. And so we have to focus on, and we have to be very careful, thoughtful, and strategic around what do I really need to be doing in order to be successful? And then focusing on those things. Because when we split focus, then we lose our energy, we lose the ability to really be effective and impactful. And so I see that people are pinging all over the place. And there's discipline that comes into this. And there's an agreement with self around I can't do everything, even in my social life and my personal life. And right now, people have to focus at work more than ever. It's requiring more of us than ever. We have the infinite workday. We can be on all the time if we choose to. It requires discipline to say, I can't do everything. So, what are the things I'm going to do because they have the biggest value and impact, and focusing there. I had a gal the other day in an executive coaching session say, I don't want to eat lunch at my desk anymore and I want to go outside once a day. And I thought to myself, isn't that kind of a sad goal that we
Yeah,
have to state that out loud?
I know,
That I
right?
want to go outside once a day and not eat lunch at my desk every day. But that's also the reality that we have a lot to do. And so sometimes it's just accepting what is. Sometimes it's being even more thoughtful around, again, where to say no and where to say yes. And discipline comes in. You don't have to reach for your phone every 5 minutes. You don't have to say yes to every request that comes through your inbox. You have to
Hmm.
be careful with where you're putting your time and energy and attention. And your managers and leaders and board members should respect that if you're saying no, it's because you're being very thoughtful about where to say yes.
And somebody said to me recently, when you say no, and that no could be in workplace, but also like, too many volunteer jobs, too many social commitments,
Yeah.
whatever. But when you say no, your yeses mean more.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
like that sentiment. By the way, that whole thing about the anxiety of the phone, there's a great book called The Anxious Generation. Maybe you've read it,
Hmm.
but
Yep.
it's phenomenal. Jonathan Haidt, if anybody out there hasn't
Very
read
good.
it, it's excellent. He's also done a lot of podcasts and webcasts on this topic, and he has solutions for how we get back to a day when teenagers, young kids and teenagers, get back to more unstructured playtime versus very scary things that happen on screen time,
Yeah.
and all the ramifications of that. But what I so yeah, it is very distracting. People are ping. I like that they're pinging all over the place. So how do you, besides listening to these these people who just want to go outside for lunch, like, is it really just some tough love you're giving these people? And who are these people? Are they the C-suite? Are they all
Mhm.
kinds of workers? Who do you work with?
I work across the board, but I would
Hmm.
say the bulk of my clients are mid-career, mid-senior to senior.
Hmm.
So in the C-suite, I don't coach a ton in C-suite, but I do advisory packages, which is sharing what I'm hearing in the field. So I can say, here's 5 trends that I'm seeing around the state of work in general, the challenges that people are facing, some solutions that are working so that they can consider implementing it in their firms. But again, most of my clients, whether it's in executive coaching, which is one-on-one coaching, or workshops or group programs like masterminds or learning cohorts, where it's a small group of people learning and growing together on specific growth goals, most of those are mid-career, mid-senior to senior. And to answer a question around listening, yeah, listening is nice, but that doesn't do much really. So it has to be paired with strategy. And for someone who's saying I want to get outside, I want to eat lunch at my desk every day, then we do a time audit, which can be really uncomfortable for some people because we go through their calendar and look at every meeting that they have, every thing that they're saying yes to, and then minute by minute, where are you putting your time and energy? And almost always there is surprise that comes out of that because people can see that they're leaking time and energy in ways that they didn't think they were. And then on the other side of that, after the awareness comes the action. So then what are you going to do about that? What are you going to get off of your calendar, even if you like it and it feels good, but it's actually causing you stress because there's too much and not enough time? How are you going to refine the way you use your time? How are you going to become more disciplined around using your time well? And that discipline is something that is difficult for people to have an appetite for, but it's truly what matters and what's going to help give them more time freedom on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like budgeting, right? It's so
Yeah.
painful, but you got to break it down. Like, what
Yes.
did you spend money on today? You know,
Right.
and just like, you're trying to lose weight. What did you eat today? It's
Yep.
painful, but you
Yes.
have to break it down. You know what was so interesting about the work at home trend that started with COVID in a bigger way is that people said, "Oh, this is great. I can actually work."
Hmm.
And now they're like, oh, I don't want to go back to the office.
Hmm.
I get my stuff done at home. It's so interesting. Like meetings, the insurance industry loves meetings all the time.
Hmm.
Meetings. Now I know you're not an insurance girl, at least not anymore, but I am, and it's meetings all the time. Not us so much here, but our clients, and I see it. Meetings, and that to me is a time vampire.
Hmm.
Who needs to be in the meet? Is there an agenda? Who needs to be there? What's the time? What are we going? Is there a pre-read? What are we coming at? What is the purpose? And you start asking these questions, and you're like, man, I don't need to be in all these meetings.
Yeah.
I am sure. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jen, but I have to think that that is a problem.
It's a huge problem. And I will say, I do consider myself an insurance gal still and always will. I
They
definitely,
need you.
thank you. I do a lot of speaking in insurance conferences, and I have quite a few insurance clients, both individually and company-wide. So, still in insurance, and the meeting monster. Yeah,
Mm,
funny about meetings because I remember doing a presentation in, let's call it 2010, around the the problem that meetings were having in our work lives and the time suck that they had. And I think we're doing a little bit better, but we have so much more work to go. And it sounds silly and simplistic. But if you're really thinking strategically around where I'm using my time and energy, and then you see all of these meetings that are consuming so much, it makes sense to step back and say, how can we do this differently? I will say I have a handful or more companies that are revamping the way their companies and their teams do meetings at the highest level, like from the CEO level down, mandating that people interact differently around meetings, such as you can't have a meeting more than 30 minutes, or if your tendency is to have a 45-minute, slash it by 10 to 15. Make sure that each meeting has a clear agenda and why each person that's being asked to attend is necessary. And so I applaud the companies that are looking at ways to help people's lives not be more there is an element of reducing the stress, but the greater element really is to help people be more productive. And so that's smart from the C-suite down.
yeah. So we were talking earlier. You mentioned to me that you're playing around with a theme, which I friggin' love. And that theme is, I think you said you read a book, but the theme is work is not meant to love you.
Yeah.
Um, can you explain what all that means and maybe what do we do about it?
Yes. I did read part of this book. Full disclosure, I read some of it and I feel like I got what I needed. The book is Work Isn't Meant to Love You Back. I started thinking about the nature of work and how it's changed over the course of the past few decades. And so my my premise with this, and I talk to groups about this, is that, if we step back and we look at the role that work has played in our lives, I've created a bunch of S's to represent this trajectory, which is it started with survival. Work was something that helped us survive and produce what we needed. And then it moved into stability to create stability in our lives. And then it moved into status for a lot of people. Your job really represented prestige and who you were and the way that you were interacting in the world and navigating the world. And then it moved into self-actualization, which I think we saw the pinnacle of that in 2020, 2021, maybe 22, and then things shifted pretty sharply into this state of stress. And I don't like leaving it in this place of stress because that can feel quite negative, but I'm just being honest about what I'm seeing out there. And I think that whenever there's a problem, there's an opportunity. And so we are in this moment of stress, and I'd like to think of it as creative tension. So we can start to think about how do we work differently in a way that is still fulfilling our needs, but in a way that is not swallowing us up. But I think that a lot of people have put a little too much into their emotional connection to work. And this is something that I've actually had to really sit with myself and investigate the way that I thought about work. In 2021, I co-led a global working group called Beautiful Work Lives. And our mission was to go out and talk to companies, teams, and people around the way that work felt. And is there a way that we can bring in more beauty into our work, more connection and purpose and values? And there was a lot of discussion around that in that time period, 2021, even 22. But total candor again, that is no longer the conversation. It's not really part of the narrative right now because we need to perform. So now companies come to me, people come to me to hire me to say, help me perform to the best degree that I can so that I can survive and have a job and feel some level of security. And so going back to like this emotional aspect of work, I think that we can and should have a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment at work if that feels important to you. And it doesn't for all people. For some people, they'll say to me, work is a means to an end. It is currency and a paycheck, and that's that. So just help me succeed. And I don't want to have like this emotional connection to work. Great. I love that kind of clarity for you. For other folks, there is this tendency to wrap emotion into work. And I think that can be really devastating for a lot of people because work at the end of the day is a business. A business is there to fulfill its mission, and it has to have profitability in order to succeed in the marketplace and have the money to pay people to have jobs. And I think that if we can zoom out and remember that's the equation, there isn't love and bonding and relationship that is offered there. And I think that we've gone a little too far with putting too much of our emotional needs into work. And I would suggest that we can pull that back some and still have fulfillment at work and still like what we're doing and find meaning in it, again, if that's important to you, without feeling this big sense of emotional toll through work.
Yeah, that's really, really insightful, Jen. Thank you for that. I think there's a lot of people listening that can relate with that, and maybe there's a balance that folks can strike there. I think that's what you're getting at. Like,
Yeah.
man,
Actually, Peter, can I share an example?
yeah, go for it.
So I was speaking at an insurance conference last fall, so that's fall 2025, and speaking on this very topic at a women's breakfast. And it was a young agents conference. So that was defined as people 40 years or younger in insurance. And a gal raised her hand and said, I feel like there's a sense of freedom in this concept because I feel like I've been fed a lie from my older millennial cohort and above
Mm,
around having like this deep sense of purpose and fulfillment and values and like this intertwining of like who I am and work. And she's like, and I love my job, but I don't need to be in love with it. And so this feels like there's a sense of freedom that I can still put all of my effort into doing the things that I think are going to help me succeed at work, and I can have a sense of fulfillment, but I don't need to be in love with work.
Which means it's a two-way, a two-way thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right. Yeah, I think it's so interesting how somehow from the business owner's standpoint, it used to be, and that this is back in the early, one of your earlier S's. What was it? Survival and then stability.
hmm
And the status probably started in the 60s with baby boomer generation, getting their coat and tie going to work, that kind of thing. I'm a sales manager. I'm an important guy. But the earlier stuff, business owners, here's a paycheck. Here's money coming in. And, and all of a sudden, they started to have to become involved in their retirement, planning and healthcare and collecting taxes, and it just got loaded up on them, and it got really, so it became, I think it became from their perspective, like I have all these birdies in the nest and the government regulations in my grill, and it's gotten stressful from my perspective too, and that's why sometimes, it's pretty, like I'm aghast when I read these layoffs, how people find out via email, but it kind of, I think if you have that kind of emotional disconnect with it, it's like, it is a means to an end. I can find work somewhere else. Maybe it's not even paid work. And I want to ask you that because I've noticed Gen Z, it started with the millennials, but they are more inclined to kind of do different things. It's a little bit of like gig work, which isn't a new concept, but I don't feel that they're as emotionally wrapped up in it because they have, I just think about my kids and my kids' friends and what they're talking about doing, and they have a lot going on, but it's not always paid work. B, it's not just like a full-time job, it's other things. And AI, it's a fascinating existential question of what's going to happen with AI, creating an environment where, the paycheck thing isn't important because there's like universal income. I'm not the first one to say all this, but I feel like, what do we do with their time? Maybe there's no more litter on the ground. Maybe people aren't homeless. Maybe people are doing more with soup kitchens and community sustainable gardens and finding other things to do because AI has replaced all that stuff. And I tell you, in the insurance industry, there is a lot of stuff that is, it's frankly just busy work. And I think we need more human connection with customers in the insurance industry. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm saying I'm not.
I agree
It's
with you.
really not a question. It just maybe more. I'm thinking about the future now more.
Well, I'll comment on that. First of all, I'm just going to say this. If people are in a position to do unpaid work, that's quite privileged. And I applaud that, but the reality is most people don't have the privilege of
Yeah.
going and doing meaningful work without a paycheck.
hmm
I don't. And so that's something we have to balance as a reality. And I agree with you around the potential of AI. There's two very different paths this can take. The one doesn't look so good. The other one, which is the one that I hope for, is that we can be smart as a population and leverage machines to do a lot of the busy work and take the stuff that they can do, the machines can do, and hopefully us humans can redirect our time and creativity to work on the big things that we need to be thinking about, like severe weather patterns. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, in the mountains. You mentioned this in the beginning. There was a hurricane in the mountains and incredible flooding that devastated the town. We were not prepared because we never thought something like that could hit us. So there's things that we can be doing, like thinking about how to prepare better for severe weather, or how can we help there to be equitable healthcare for all in our country? These are things that I know because I'm in conversation with people all the time that people think about and want to do, but there's no time. There's no time when we have to work so much and so hard right now.
Yeah. So I have just a couple more questions for you, Jen. I wanted to ask you, maybe go back a little bit on the leadership question. When you run into leaders in an organization, I know you're trying to get them, like we talked about the need to free up your calendar and focus on what's important, say no more, et cetera, et cetera. What is the ideal kind of state we're looking for here? What are some things about leaders that they're really thriving? You try to get them to that place. But are there certain things you've noticed that it's more about the soft skills, things people are born with? What is it about really great leaders you've run into, and how do you help not so great now leaders get there if you can?
Maybe I'll back up first and talk about how I define a leader. I think that this definition has changed over the years as well. So years ago, leaders primarily were defined by hierarchy, a certain title, and by managing other people. And those things usually went hand in hand. And now what I see in the marketplace and what I agree with is that there is a clear distinction between a people manager and leadership competencies. And so this means that people who are individual contributors who don't manage people, there is a greater opportunity for them to have visibility and more responsibility and to demonstrate their leadership abilities through leadership competencies like communication and executive composure and knowing how to make decisions and thinking big picture and business acumen and thinking like your stakeholders, and the list goes on and on. So that's really the core of what I work with on people, is understanding how to possess and demonstrate those leadership competencies. So there's some strategy involved in that. There's getting to know where a person is in terms of their awareness of what they need to work on, and then putting an action plan in place. There's a lot of real-time workshopping around what's happening in your day to day, and then how are you going to do things differently, go practice, report back, then we tweak and we pivot. We want people to have greater clarity on who they are and their growth goals and their development areas. And then we want them to put action into place to change those things. And at the end, we want them to feel more confident and competent. And oftentimes there's this question around, where do I go from here? You know, there's the next step that my HR or manager said is available to me, but what else is there? Like, where do I want my career to go? I think this is a really healthy question because, again, years ago, there was this tendency to outsource our growth to our company. We waited for our company to say, here's where you could go or should go. And now that's no longer the case. Now, like, I have companies that hire me and other people like me to come in and help their employees craft their next action plan. Like, what's the next step that you want to take based upon your skills, your passion points, your interest, your curiosity, and then how do you match that with what is the business case and the impact that I can have inside of my company to create even more value? So I know that was a long answer that went in a couple of different places, but that's really the core of what we're working on.
Yeah, taking more control over your own destiny versus waiting for, quote, the man to.
And that also benefits companies. They don't have the time and resources to often sit down with each employee and dig into, where is this person's strengths? Are they truly being leveraged so the business can see an impact from those skills? What are their growth areas? How do you up level them quickly so the business can see a greater impact too? So this kind of work is, yes, very individual, but for me, I usually work inside of a company. It benefits the company to have stronger, more skilled employees at the table too.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. Okay, so you mentioned squiggly line. Is there anything, if you could go coach your younger self, what would you do? How would you coach your younger self? Anything differently?
I would say be patient, be open. I felt like, how do I say this? In the past, let's call it 7, 8 years in my career now and in my business, I was able to step back and look at all of the things that I've done. So I've had a career in insurance and the security firm that I mentioned. I was an executive assistant at a bank in California for the 4 most top levels of the bank. And so I was with executives in that kind of environment. I did real estate for a short time. And at first, these things can look very disparate. But then once I studied the through line, I was like, oh, there's a lot of things that make sense here that connect and that have supported and complemented each other. So I would tell my younger self, don't try to create the story right away. Just go create chapters. You can look for the through line or the arc later. Go experiment and have fun and figure out what you like to do. What are the skills that stretch you in a good way? What are the things that just aren't natural to you? Focus on your strengths. So I think there's an element of experimentation, exploration, and patience that I would tell my younger self.
Cool. Very cool. Is there anything you do on a daily basis with any kind of tools, practices, mindsets that kind of has an impact on your own life and how you approach your clients?
I stretch every morning, which again might sound simple. It takes 2 minutes, but just connecting to my body before I get into my day is something that is a non-negotiable. I also think that part of my life view or my worldview, my spirituality, whatever you call it, is one that I feel clear about goals and serious about my goals, but I also don't take myself or life too seriously. That's something actually my dad taught me, is don't take it all so seriously. And I think about having fun and bringing impact to whatever I do, but also having fun with it, which is something that is necessary for me. I don't like to be bored.
Yeah, right. So are you feeling hopeful about, if you look at, just step outside of what you do for a moment and look at the your client base and your prospective client base, look at the world who you could influence, these people. Do you feel optimistic about everything, like where it's all headed? Because there's so much, you mentioned stress, the final S that we're in right now. I just feel like, and this goes back to the thing about the phones, people are more connected than ever with stuff going on in the world. It used to be you just cared about your own tribe, and then you cared about your neighborhood, and then, you had 200 people you were in touch with. You had your close friends and you had friends, you had 200 acquaintances, and things would happen and you get stressed about somebody dying or whatever. Now it's like, if you turn on, I don't care whether it's CNN or Fox, you turn it on, those bad things happening around the world, in our country, and you feel like it's happening to you. It's like this dread feeling. I'm telling you, it's why people are anxious than ever. But I have to feel like it's going to get better, and it may not be the older folks who make that happen. It could just be this ginormous generation, Gen Z, and the one right behind them, which is also very large, kind of doing things differently. How do you feel about what I said, and what's your take?
I want to be optimistic, and I think that is my natural point of view. And I also feel deeply concerned about where we're at as a country and a world. And I don't know what it's gonna take for us to shift. What I do know is that us screaming at each other, especially into a social media void, doesn't really do much except dysregulate our nervous systems and make us sad and feel bad and reach for all kind of tools to escape. What I hope for is that people can start to have constructive, creative dialogue and learn from one another. I think if we strip away the political parties, there's more in common than we think. I have a really good friend who we vote differently, we believe in different things, but we have agreed to have these respectful conversations with each other to say, okay, let's talk about one issue and then dissect it. And more times than not, we have very similar views, but we're using different language. And so the one thing that I would hope that we humans can do right now is to start being quieter, like just listen a little bit more, and then have tools to have creative, constructive dialogue underneath that. That's step one.
Yeah, that's great. If you, there's a good chance you would have like very few or fewer friends if you didn't, if it was just arguing about politics, I'm right, you're wrong. And I think you're totally right. People are way more in sync than you would think. So totally agree. Jenn, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you, Peter.
It was really fun. We could talk a lot longer. Good luck with the business. And
thank you.
We'll see you down the road.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Thank you, everyone.
This has been On Point with Peter van Aartrijk, a podcast presentation of Wells Media Group.